Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this interview that is an introduction to the Philosophy with Children program of the 12th edition of the Philosophical Film Festival in Skopje, Macedonia. For anyone that has ever been introduced to the idea of philosophy with children, the first name that comes to mind, besides the one of the late founder of the discipline, Matthew Lipman, is the name of Professor Thomas Wартенберг. Well, to our great honor and pleasure, today we have him here with us for an interview as a teaser for his participation as a edition of the Philosophical Film Festival. Thomas Wартенберg is a professor of philosophy emeritus at Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts, USA. And he is well known for his work in the areas of aesthetics, the philosophy of film, and especially philosophy with children. He is a winner of many awards and acknowledgements, such as the 2011 APA PDC Prize for Excellence and Innovation in Philosophy Programs, and received the 2013 Merit Prize for his contributions to the philosophy of education. For the past decade, he has taught a course of college students, Philosophy for Children, in which the college students learn how to teach philosophy to elementary school children. This course is the basis of his book, Big Ideas for Little Kids, Teaching Philosophy Through Children's Literature. His most recent book in the area of aesthetics and philosophy of film is Thinking on Screen Film as Philosophy. And there is a lot more to be said about his work, but I will let him do the talking. Well, Professor Wартенберg, welcome, and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you. I feel honored to be to this interview and then to the conference itself.
Thank you. Let me start with one famous quotation of yours that says, education will not live up to its ideals until we make every student a philosopher. Well, what do you mean by that? And can you please explain what philosophy for children is and what is its importance for the development of the individual and the society in general?
Okay, so that quote was actually, I don't know what the right word is, not exactly a parody, but it references a claim that Plato made in the Republic, where he said that basically justice won't be achieved in society until the philosophers become rulers. And so I tried to sort of make reference to that and say that it seems equally important to me in a democracy that everyone, and therefore we start with the children, have some acquaintance with philosophy. And I should say, in saying this, I don't think that everybody should become a professional philosopher, but I do think it's important that people understand philosophy. And the primary reason is because one of the aspects of philosophy is understanding and being able to analyze arguments. And so the idea is, in a society, especially these days, where there are all these statements being made by politicians that I would say have no legitimate basis in fact, it's important that people learn how to think more critically and be able to assess the claims that are being made. So when we work with children, when I work with children, what I'm trying to do, among other things, is inculcate this sort of critical spirit in them where they don't take ideas on the basis of who said them, but rather on the rational justification provided. And the term that we philosophers use here is argument, which is not used in the sort of ordinary English sense, but it means you need to look critically at the reasons that are given and the evidence to assess whether what's being said is true or not.
And since today there are many theoreticians and practitioners of philosophy for children, and the number is continually growing, there is a great diversity of methods specially designed for doing philosophy with children. I would like to know what are the specifics of the method or the methods you use when you practice philosophy with children.
So you're right. I mean, there's a lot of diversity in how people approach doing philosophy with children. But I think what they all have in common is, excuse me, a rejection of the idea that what we are trying to do is transmit philosophical knowledge to children. We're not trying to get them to know what any of the great philosophers said, or even what the sort of standard philosophical problems are and the different positions that are possible in regard to them. Rather, what we're trying to do is engage children directly in the practice of philosophy. As I said earlier, that means, teaching them how arguments, assess arguments, object to views that they don't agree with, and basically engage in a rational conversation with their peers about important issues. Now, the way that I have done it, I've chosen a specific set of materials to use. And for the most part in elementary school, what I've done, initially I chose to do that sort of pragmatically because in the United States anyway, teachers were required to teach children picture books. And so rather than adding on a new subject matter for teachers who are already feeling oppressed by all the demands on their time, I just said, look, I have a way to help you teach what you have to teach more effectively. Mm-hmm. But for older kids, I've used films, and actually I've even used picture books in my college classes to teach the students there philosophy.
Well, the Philosophical Film Festival actually grounded on the idea of the possibility for close connection between philosophy and film. And as I said previously, you're also working in the areas of aesthetics and philosophy of film. And one of your most recent books in this area is Thinking on Screen, Film as Philosophy. Well, how do you see the connection between philosophy and film? And how much do you use it in your classes with children and younger students?
So what I was trying to argue in Thinking on Screen is that there's a very close relationship between at least some films and philosophy. I'd say in general, what I've been trying to argue for many years is that philosophy can be found in lots of places where people don't expect it to be. There's a sort of assumption that, if you want to study philosophy or you think about philosophical issues, you have to go to the philosophy section in a library or a bookstore and take out these, at least an introduction to philosophy or books by philosophers like Plato, Aristotle, Kant, or whomever. But what I've been trying to say is I think that there's philosophy, that artists in general have philosophical concerns, and that if we're sensitive to this, we can actually find philosophy in, for example, films. And so that's what I tried to show in Thinking on Screen. I tried to look at a wide variety of different types of films and try to show that there are actually philosophical concerns being addressed by these films in ways that are quite instructive. And so my hope was that would make people really see that philosophy is much more widely practiced and thought about than by professional philosophers or in specifically philosophy classes. Now, when it comes to the youngest children that I've taught, I have not used films. And part of that is a technical issue, which is you have to figure out how to make film clips because you can't watch a very long film in a classroom, so you have to have the students watch it outside of class. However, I was very fortunate. A filmmaker who actually had made a film about my course, my college course initially, got very interested in the idea of doing philosophy with children. And she specifically wanted to address ethical issues. And she wanted to focus on middle school because she thought that that was a neglected age, that, you know, here I was working with younger children, and by the time kids get to high school, there's a lot of interest in programs for them, but in middle school, she thought there wasn't. And so we developed together a website, and a website called What's the Big Idea? And that website uses clips from popular films and television shows to address 5 different ethical issues that the children, she surveyed the children, and these are the middle school students said these are the most important ethical issues in their lives. So I've used that with middle school students and also with high school students, and I think it works quite well. It's now, the clips are a little dated, which is one of the perils of using them, but they still raise really important issues. And in fact, in my lecture, I was planning to use one of these clips from a film called Sarah's Key to discuss philosophical issue of whether it's okay to lie and when.
Yes, that brings us to the next question I was meaning to ask you, and that is that, as I mentioned at the beginning, you will be a special guest at the 12th edition of the Philosophical Film Festival, and on 26th and 27th of May, you will hold open for the general public, a workshop for people interested in practicing philosophy with children, and a practical demonstration with a class of second grade children. Can you please shortly explain what can we expect of these events?
Well, in planning, I thought of them sort of as a program, so that anyone who watched or attended all 3 would get a good sense of what it is to do philosophy with children. So in the lecture, I will give a general introduction to introduce children to philosophy. I will, as I said, use a specific example of a film. And if there's enough time, I will also use a brief example from a picture book, so that people will see the different ways in which you can use different sorts of art forms to introduce children to philosophy and have them explore philosophical issues. I'll actually show a clip, if I have time again, from a discussion that second graders had. That's part of the film that I mentioned that the filmmaker made. The workshop, I was intending to work with people who are interested in developing philosophy for children and help them understand what's involved in doing that. But I thought what might be really important is to work together. I've chosen a story and what the philosophical issues are. How do you think about what questions you might want to ask students to discuss? And because, you know, I don't know what books are available to you, but if you have materials that you want to teach, how would you develop those materials? So that was my idea, that the workshop would be helping people, I mean, using the story that I know, but the idea would be that then they could apply it to whatever stories or films, for example, that they were actually interested in using in their classrooms. And then when I work with the children, I'm just going to do what we normally do in our sessions. I will read them a story and then use that to have a philosophical discussion. The story is actually by a wonderful picture book illustrator and author, Arnold Lobel, and it's called Dragons and Giants. It features these 2 characters that at least Americans know pretty well, Frog and Toad. And partly it's short and we can work on it And I think second graders really like it. And it will discuss the nature of bravery and the relationship between fear and bravery.
Well, as a last question for this interview, I would like to ask you, what advices would you give us to the people interested in the area of starting, interested in the idea of starting philosophy with children in Macedonia? And from your experience, what is the best way to develop this practice in one country and to hopefully get to the point of implementing it in the official educational curriculum? To this moment, we have managed to do several independent philosophy with children workshops as a part of the festival. And thanks to the educational platform Učilnica, we started doing philosophy courses for children. What are the next steps you would advise us to do?
Well, actually, this is sort of a difficult question for me to answer,
yes,
because I'm not familiar with the educational system in Macedonia. But I can tell you that in my own experience, I've always sort of I've tried to work sort of from the bottom up, that I thought the most important thing is to try to get teachers really involved and to buy into the idea of philosophy for children. And so what I've done, I've worked with individual teachers, but then I've also partnered with them in doing workshops for teachers who are interested in the school system, and to try to get enough interest on the part of teachers that then you can have them, or you and them, go to the administrators and discuss why it's a good idea to introduce philosophy into the curriculum. I mean, I know in a lot of countries, there's a much more centralized educational system than we have in the United States. And so I think, like in one of the provinces in Canada and also in Australia, they were able to go, to the government and basically mandate that there be philosophy classes of certain sorts. But that's not a possibility in the United States. And so I've had to work from the bottom up. And I actually enjoy that. I think it's really good to get the teachers interested. When there's a mandate that comes down on them and they don't see the rationale for that, I think it's much more likely to fail or not be done well.
Well, thank you very much for this pleasant and insightful interview that gave us a nice glimpse into the exciting world of philosophy with children. And we can hardly wait for your events at the upcoming Philosophical Film Festival. Thank you again, Professor.
Thank you very much.